This is Rabbi Akiva Zweig on Foundational Concepts of Judaism. Today we will be discussing the topic of Emunah. The Hebrew word Emunah is commonly translated as faith. And I think the common understanding is that religion, and specifically Judaism as well, requires faith in order for a person to be a good Jew or an observant Jew. And the real question is, what is the Jewish requirement as it relates to the concept of faith? Is faith a necessary ingredient in terms of a person being a good Jew? So this is actually a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, because my experience in dealing with hundreds and hundreds of all types of Jews as well as other people is that most people think that having belief in God or having faith that there is a God is a very lofty and worthy pursuit. In addition to that, most people, in fact, I would say practically all people, think that it's not possible for a person to actually know that there's a God. That indeed, for a person to know something like there's a God is a definite impossibility. And this is because most people would say, I know I sit in a chair, I know I can feel a table, I know I can see a person or an object in front of me, but I cannot see a God. And unless a person happens to have delusions and illusions where they think that they either encounter or speak to God, most people are ready to admit that they don't have first-hand conversations with God, or that they have not seen God. If so, most people conclude that it's not really possible to know that there's a God. And the reason that this topic is so near and dear to my heart is because, in fact, everything that Judaism teaches us is quite the opposite. So if we are simply to ask the question, is it important in Judaism to believe that there's a God? The answer is no. It is not important. In fact, it would be wrong, because belief implies not knowing that there's a God. So if we change the question and say, is there a requirement in Judaism to know that there is a God? The answer to that is definitely yes. How do we know that there is a requirement to know that there is a God? The Torah itself says, and you should know today, and you should put into your heart that God is the God above and over all the earth below, and there is none other. And that, in fact, a sentence that many Jews quote several times a day when they recite the prayer of the Aleinu. It's actually a sentence from Deuteronomy. So the fact is that the Torah requires that a person know that there is a God. So the first thing we're going to do, after having established that the Torah requires not to believe but to know that there is a God, is to explain a very simple example of what the difference is between knowledge and belief. Now, I know maybe the more burning question that you have is, how can you know something that's impossible to see and that you don't have first-hand conversations or experience with? And that's a very, very good question, and we will get to that, but not in today's podcast. That will be in the next podcast. For today, what we're going to establish is the difference between knowledge and belief. So here's the very simple example. Pretend that you have $10 million of investable income. That means you have enough money to live, but there's $10 million that you can invest and do whatever you want with that money. But only $10 million. And so imagine that you believe that a certain stock, let's say Apple, is going to triple tomorrow at the opening of the stock market. How much Apple stock are you buying today? You believe very strongly that Apple stock is going to triple at the opening of the market tomorrow. Are you going to invest $1 million? $5 million? What would really be the amount that you would invest? Now, most people, when I ask them that question, are somewhere between 30 and 70%. The big risk takers go all the way up to 70. Rarely I've seen 80. But almost nobody ever says 100%. And usually it hovers somewhere between 30 and 50% after they understand that they have enough to live on. And you have enough to live on in this example. So how much are you investing? 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%? Almost nobody says 100%. Now let's change the question. If you knew for a fact that Apple stock was going to triple tomorrow, how much would you be investing in Apple stock of your 10 million investable dollars? Invariably, in all the people that I speak to, almost every single person says 100%. How do you know exactly? That's one of the questions. So either you use a Back to the Future example, where you went forward in time and you know that it happened and now you're back in time, or some other method that you could imagine that you would absolutely know, and leave aside the illegalities of insider trading, all that. If you know, you would invest 100%. Most rational people would do that. It wouldn't make sense not to. Does anybody not want to triple their money? So, we've now clearly demonstrated the difference between belief and knowledge, and that is the amount of conviction in which a person lives their life is different if it's based on belief or based on knowledge. If it's based on belief, they're 30% in or 70% in, but they're not all in, almost ever. But if a person has knowledge of something to be true, then, as they say in today's vernacular, you go all in, because you're 100% convinced of the truth of the fact upon which you are basing your life or investing yourself. Isn't there a huge difference then between belief and knowledge? If at the end of the day we're not sure whether or not there is a God, doesn't that mean I'm going to live my life radically different than if I am, yes, sure that there is a God? Now, of course, there are many ancillary questions such as, okay, there's a God, what else? What then? What comes next? And those are all questions that hopefully we're going to address as well. But there's no question that the amount of conviction that you have based on a questionable belief of God versus a definite knowledge that there is a God is absolutely radically different. In addition to all this is the general understanding that we need to have about religion and belief. In the Webster's Dictionary, one of the normal definitions of religion is that it is a system of beliefs. By that definition, I would argue that Judaism is in fact not a religion. Judaism is not based on belief, it's based on knowledge. Judaism does not dictate that a person should believe that there's a God. Judaism mandates that a person know that there's a God, as we mentioned in the sentence from Aleinu, based in Deuteronomy. In addition to that, there are many other sentences that tell us about the knowledge of that there is a God. The whole Torah is built on that. The first of the 10 Commandments, which says, "Behold, I am the Lord your God," not that the word "behold" is in there, but "I am the Lord your God," according to Nachmanides and many other important commentators, that line of the first of the 10 Commandments is a requirement to know that there is a God. I am the Lord your God is the first statement in the 10 Commandments, because God is saying that the foundation of everything is to know, K-N-O-W, that there is, yes, a God. In addition to that God took us out of Egypt, and many other important aspects which we will not get into today. But under the definition of religion being a system of belief, if we understand, as Nachmanides does, that the first of the 10 Commandments is to know that there is a God, I would argue that Judaism is not a religion at all. It's a system that is based on knowledge and the continued pursuit of further knowledge. So for today, I think it is enough for us to just ponder the very important differences between belief and knowledge, and to know that what Judaism requires is a knowledge that there is a God. One must know, K-N-O-W, that there is a God, and the amount of conviction and commitment that a person will have to their lives based on that knowledge versus based on belief, and as well to understand that Judaism is not by any sense a classic religion if we define religion as being based on beliefs.